All right. Well, welcome everybody to yet another exciting episode of One of Us Knows What They're Talking About, and the other one is you. So, we're going to talk today about banks and about bankers, not any banker in particular, not any banks in particular, but in having an estate planning and probate law firm, there are a lot of interactions that we get to have when it comes to financial institutions. And because of that, we have experienced a number of, oh, just confusion, perhaps miscommunication when it comes to that. So we're going to dive into that and hope like heck that other people have things to contribute, but I will drone on. I am joined today, as I normally am, by Sara Gibson, marketing coordinating marketing, Sam Anderson, the administrative assistant, assisting with administration, Cyntia Frederick, operations manager, managing operations. But forget all them, because we are featuring another member of the Burch Law Squad, and that is Gabriella. Do you want to say Valles? Okay, we'll say it if that's what you want to say. And we call her Gabi, but you can't. Okay, so you listeners, you can call her Gabriella. But Gabi, welcome to the show, and say hello to our fans. I would just give it in. And Gabi is a client concierge, what does that mean, Sara?
Oh, this is gonna be good.
Oh, she's a concierge to the clients.
At least she didn't say she concierges the clients.
I thought about it.
Oh,
I
okay.
felt it.
Well,
I felt like it was on deck. And Gabi is joining us today because Gabi actually has a background. I mean, as much as you really shouldn't talk about people you've dated with your current partner, spouse, love interest, you shouldn't talk about where you used to work with your current employers, but it's fine. It's okay. I know there was life before me. But Gabi actually has a lot of experience working in banks, and she's going to give us a different perspective. But first, let me tell you why I wanted to talk about this and why we do a lot of education around it. Because I need to say this, because I don't think anybody listening will believe me if I don't say this first. I think having a relationship with someone at your bank, a personal banker, is a great idea. There's a lot they can help you with, guide you on, really assist you. Some of my best stories, and I'll share some, are interactions with personal bankers. But I want to talk first about banks in general as the whole. And the good news is, I can't say that there's any one of them that's particularly bad. I've had issues with all of them when it comes to this. And I'm going to try and tread lightly, but for those of you who may be in banking or who are bankers or love them, uh, I'm not trying to disparage you. In fact, I'd like you to reach out to us, because I truly have found knowing a personal banker is what makes things much, much easier. But let me just go through a real quick list of things that we often see and have issues with. So one of the most common things we have issues with banking and banks and financial institutions is what's called a statutory durable power of attorney, or sometimes you've seen this called a general power of attorney, or sometimes you might hear it referred to, as we like to refer to it, as a financial power of attorney. And that's not the actual title of the document, but we call it that because that helps you distinguish in your mind from a medical power of attorney. Because a medical power of attorney says that this is who can make medical decisions for me if I'm unable to. So a financial power of attorney says what, Sam?
A financial power of attorney is
what does it do? What's it for?
It is to help whoever is your agent, if you are incapacitated, help them be able to pay your bills, and just kind of go to your bank and stuff if they need to get some money out for you, stuff like that.
Okay. Let me ask you a question, and we're going to play a game. Does Sam Anderson know more than a banker?
How do
Round
I
one.
give you answers?
This is what happens when you don't do a better job preparing for an episode. I'm just going to give you your lines anyway.
Yeah,
so,
go ahead.
Cyntia, if somebody dies,
Oh.
can a power of attorney be used?
No.
Okay, you don't shake your head. This is a podcast, Sam.
Fair. Well, you asked Cyntia.
You can
No,
still
I
answer.
asked you.
You said
Cyntia.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to ask Cyntia. That's no fun.
Hey, Sarah, you're leaving the sun.
Okay, I'm gonna have a harder one then for Sam. Okay, but let's focus on that one because this happens all of the time. Is we'll get a call and somebody will say, "My mom passed away," and I called the bank. The bank said, "Well, do you have her power of attorney?" No, like a power of attorney dies with the person. It is only while you are alive, whether you are incapacitated, disabled, or it could be, I don't know how nuanced we want to get into this, but we'll see where it leads us. It could also be where you just out of convenience. For example, my mom was in Hawaii and decided that she had to refinance her mortgage right then and there. And so because I had her power of attorney, I walked into the bank and I was able to sign all the paperwork. And, come to think of this, is probably why I'm her power of attorney, because in hindsight, I never questioned it. I just did it. And I'm pretty sure my siblings would have been like, why? And I was just like, yes, mommy, what do you need me to do? But I did. So I completely refinanced her mortgage. Another example was when my stepfather passed away and I was trying to help my mom call companies, just credit card companies, utilities, to notify them, and they wouldn't talk to me. And so my mom did a power of attorney at that time for me so that I could say, no, I can talk on behalf of my mom and all of that. So those are all uses. But again, it's only valid while somebody is alive, no matter how much they're alive or how much they are close to not being alive. But when they pass away, the power of attorney is meaningless. And we hear this a lot from financial institutions. That's one of the things I wanted to make sure that we address. Another thing, Sam.
Yes.
It's too bad I messed that up because now I'm going to make it harder for you. What is a POD?
It is a payable on death account. So that way, if somebody passes away, you notify the bank and then it'll get it out.
I think that's close enough.
Okay.
That's close enough. What is a TOD? She's thinking, for those of you listening.
Transfer on death?
Yeah. What does that mean?
I
should ask Sarah, shouldn't I?
We really need a soundboard for when she gets it right.
Yeah, it'd be fun. We should do that.
Don't worry, Sarah will add that in the editing.
She'll add it in post.
When somebody passes away, it'll get transferred, I'm guessing, to like another bank account or something.
Yeah, I mean, that we don't need to get this deep into it, but you're right. Good job guessing, or just knowing. So Sam and Cyntia now both know more than the average banker that we deal with. And that is a POD, means payable on death. It basically, typically what it means is that if you have a POD on an account, so I've got a checking account and I make Sarah my POD. That means when I die, they'll close the account and they'll pay it to Sarah. To get a little nuanced, if it's a TOD, which is not as much done or commonly done with bank accounts like that, but sometimes like stock accounts, a transfer on death means the account stays, the asset stays. It just takes on, it transfers ownership to the other person. Okay. So we're going to have some fun. I did not envision it going this way, but this is much more fun. Sarah. No, I don't know that I want to do this to Sarah.
I think you should. Just see what happens.
No, at some point, I know that I'm going to start hearing from people that I pick on Sarah. I just know it. I feel it coming. If our 2 listeners listen to more than 3 episodes.
21.
21? I want 22. Why?
Taylor Swift.
I need to get that one right. How about a free-for-all? What does listing a beneficiary mean? What's a beneficiary designation?
Sarah, you had it.
That is why I said it's a free-for-all. I did not want to see the pain come across Sarah's face. Come on.
But I think you had it. Like you were about to open your mouth and like start talking.
Yeah.
That's where you designate beneficiaries. Who's going to get your stuff?
Okay. Right. So
Yeah.
people are very used to seeing this like life insurance, retirement, sometimes brokerage or investment accounts. It's a beneficiary form. And it basically says when you die, this is who gets that asset, right? That is a beneficiary. Who is the beneficiary of that asset? So if you're putting all the logic together, is a POD and a TOD just a type of a beneficiary designation? I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
I will speak it out loud. Yes.
Yes. Speak it out loud.
Everyone's just nodding. I'm like, yes, with your mouth words. Come on.
I know.
What are those?
So one of my
Did you
more
just ask?
recent, so this was like a 10-minute way to tee this up. Is one of my favorite recent stories is a fellow Texas probate attorney said that they were told that their client was told from a bank that they can do a POD, but they can't do a beneficiary designation. And to stop asking to do a beneficiary designation, they can only do a POD.
So I do have a question for Gabby.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
whenever what?
Gabby's on the board.
Okay, well that was a little aggressive. So Gabby, whenever people come into a bank and they don't have like a designated person that they're working with, and let's say they just come up to like a teller and they say, "Hey, I need to have a beneficiary in my account." Does typically, or in your experience, is the teller the one that like knows what to do, or how does that process go down?
So if they walk in and they go straight to the teller is going to do a warm handoff where they walk the customer over to a personal banker. They'll
Mhm.
tell them, this is so and so, they're looking to do this. And then at that point, the banker will take over.
Okay. I think that's a thing that also a lot of people think they can just walk in and talk to pretty much anyone at a bank.
No, so a
And
lot of times the tellers, it's mostly transactions. So withdrawals, deposits, transferring between accounts, sending money. If it's, doing stuff to the actual accounts itself, like adding people or adding, beneficiaries, that's usually with a personal banker.
okay.
So what I've told some clients, so Gabby, tell me if this is, I mean, I don't care if bankers don't like this, but I'm just curious. One piece of advice I've given to clients sometimes is if they get resistance, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about specifics of where we see some resistance, is ask for the branch manager. And because a lot of the time, the branch manager is the one that's like, yeah, of course, you can change this account into a living trust and all of this and that. But like even the personal banker, after the very warm, lukewarm, clammy, whatever kind of handoff they're getting, often, in my experience from hearing from clients, also doesn't necessarily know what the heck is going on. What what have you seen on your side of things about what I just said?
About like when they go in straight for the
I guess
manager.
it's really twofold. One, when personal bankers that you don't have a relationship with, that you're being handed off to, doesn't seem to, they tell somebody, no, you can't do that, or no, you can't put an account in a living trust, or no, you can't. I'm going to give other examples here, but you can just do a small estate affidavit, or do you have a power of attorney when you say someone's passed away? So one is like, what happens when even the handoff person doesn't really seem to know what's going on, and or two, what on the bank side of things happens when people like me tell clients to just say, all right, if they don't know what you're talking about, just ask for a branch manager.
Well, it's okay to ask for the branch manager, but if the banker doesn't know what they're doing, then they're supposed to ask for help. They shouldn't just be dismissing the customer,
Yes.
but
What
usually
have you
go ahead.
yes, no,
Go.
usually what? I think you were getting to what I was going to ask.
No, you go.
Were you going to say usually, perhaps, maybe sometimes, quite often, every once in a while, they don't know what they're doing?
I mean, it depends on how long, the banker has been in that position. A lot of baby bankers don't know what they're doing and they need to be
Oh,
shadowed.
baby
I love
bankers.
that.
That's
Yeah, that's
cute.
what they're called, baby bankers. They need to be
I could call them
shadowed.
baby attorneys.
Yeah.
Oh.
They, you know what? I saw them somewhat antagonistically before, but now that you cast them in this light as like a little baby banker, little baby banker doesn't even know their first word yet.
Like
It,
boss baby.
I feel
Well,
differently now.
I'll Sam.
See, I told
Same
you I could
level
offer
of
a different
frustration.
perspective.
Yes, baby banker. Interesting. Well, so anybody else want to add anything on that before I tell a few stories? Sarah, you kind of look like you've got something. No? Are you just breathing
I'm just breathing.
through your mouth?
That's okay.
Yes.
Are you a mouth breather?
Can we not discuss this right now?
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we know what topic is off limits there.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I wanted to explain a couple things that I've seen happen and use some specific examples. So I alluded to this thing earlier. If you've listened to previous podcasts, which of course you have, and if you haven't, I already know that you've put it on your to-do list, like go back and listen to the other ones and get caught up. But one of the things that you can do when somebody passes away, sometimes depends, which is the whole point of why I'm going to tell this story, is what's called a small estate affidavit. And there are very specific requirements that have to be met in order to use a small estate affidavit. And it's few and far between, but it exists. And I think it's in the baby banker handbook that it exists, but then nothing about how they can actually be used is in there. That's some foreshadowing. So does anybody want to offer what one of the requirements for a small estate affidavit is? Cyntia, I know not to ask Sam or Sarah.
I think it's estates that are under 70,000, right?
It's so
correct?
close. So 75,000
So
currently.
close.
Used to be
And
50,000. And actually, Sarah, I just realized the blog that we have up
it
has
is.
not been
That's what I was
updated.
looking at.
Yeah, we need to update that.
And also the
but
debts can't outweigh the assets.
Right. So that means if there's $50,000 in the estate, but debts like credit card bills, for example, are 55,000, that meets the first criteria of being below 75,000, but it doesn't meet the other one because the debts exceed it. Okay. What else? Anybody want to offer this? Cyntia wants
No
to.
will?
Sam wants to. Yes, Sam. Excellent.
Whoa.
Sam Anderson knows
you.
more.
you.
Sam Anderson knows more than baby bankers already. Yes. This is if there is no will. Let me repeat this again. This is if there is no will. Okay. There is one final one that I want to use here. But if there's not anybody, it doesn't look like anybody's chomping at the bit to offer this. So let me just say it. The value of your home, if it's your homestead, doesn't have to be included in the 75,000. But here's what's important about that. It would, whoever is going to inherit, and if it's a small estate affidavit, it's according to the state of Texas, you're not making your choices. Hence why if there's a will, you can't use this because your will says who you want it to go to. And so therefore, by law, you should use the will. But the small estate affidavit is just going to give it to the heirs of the estate. Well, the heirs of the estate would also have to that would also have to be their homestead. Let me give you an example. Is if it's a married couple, right? They married, you both have the homestead exemption. It's both your homestead. One passes away, the survivor, that's still their homestead. So that value can be excluded from the total of 75,000, which most homes are going to blow that 75,000 out the water, but you could use it in that case. If it's, say, a child, like an adult child, so mom passes away, has a 40-year-old son, it would be included because that 40-year-old son, that's not his homestead. I could get a little bit more nuanced with that, but I'm not going to. Okay. The important reason there's lots of important reasons to understand. But basically, every single criteria we went through are examples of where I've seen banks tell people the wrong things. One, I've heard so often people say, yeah, my mom passed away and the bank said I could do a small estate affidavit. And they said they could do it because they're looking at one singular account that must be under 75,000. But then come to find out there's other assets or there's other debts or they don't know anything about whether there's a home or not that should be included. Or they they don't know if there's a will. And so sometimes we'll say, your mom has a will. You can't use the small estate affidavit. So this is another scenario where I've seen a lot of misinformation and a lot of confusion get explained to clients from banks. I want
To
to give
add on
another
to
really
that,
yes,
I
I
was
was
just
going
going
to
to add one piece to that is we've also had people who come to us and are like, hey, the bank told me to do small estate affidavit, but they won't disclose how much money is in a particular account that they're trying to do it for. So that's something where you don't know, they can't tell you. So how do you find out? You go to court, spoiler alert, you go to court.
No, that's a great example. I was actually going to say, is there anything else on this before I move on to
Oh.
another one? So good job, Cyntia, for anticipating my question.
I live in your
Um,
brain.
The other area that we see a lot of confusion and conflict with banks is when it comes to the revocable living trust. And our very last episode, we talked about ways to avoid probate, and we talked a great deal about a revocable living trust. And one of the things that has to be done with that, or often you want to do with that, is to actually have your financial accounts go from your name changed over into the title of the trust. And with a revocable living trust, and it's very important that you understand what type of trust I'm talking about, there is no separate tax ID, there's no separate tax return or anything like that. It's like a name change. So what I try to tell clients to say, to be their own advocate, if they're not going to reach out to us to help, is tell them it's just like if you get married, you don't have to close an account or change an account. You just have to update the name on the account. Now I want to use my married name. It really is, from a legal standpoint, as simple as that. But we hear stories of like cold sweats of bankers, probably the baby bankers, that don't have any idea. They're confused. They're like, what kind of trust is this? No, this has to be a trust account. No, we can't do that. And the first thing I usually tell clients is just tell them to get a branch manager. No, tell them to say, that's fine. I just want to close all my accounts then. Can we do that? Because 9 times out of 10, if you say that, then they suddenly will go find a branch manager, and then the branch manager will say, yes, of course, we can just change this over, if you're up for that kind of battle. This is, by the way, another reason, and we've talked about this, we will talk about this probably till the end of time, why it's important, one, to not do your estate plan online or DIY wills, or to go to the cheapest law firm you can find, because you're not going to get help with this stuff. And so firms like ours do our very, very best to not only provide that assistance, but give you checklists and guidelines and tell you what to say, and then to be willing to talk to your bankers and financial people to be able to explain all of that. But that's something that there's no way for us to anticipate that, because from a legal standpoint, it's the same Social Security. It's just the same. And we never know what we're going to see happen. Any commentary on that from the rest of you?
No, I
None
do
from
have a
Sam.
question for Gabi. So,
Yes,
Gabi, she's our insight into this. So,
I know.
if, as Lorie was saying, like somebody comes in, one of our clients goes into a bank, and in the past, you and I have talked about how everything was very procedure driven, and everything is like manuals and things like that. From your experience, how long would you say that it takes somebody to fully or mostly competently be familiar with the procedures, with the roles, like with the different types of possible transactions, things like that?
I would say it takes about a year or two
Okay.
to like get all those different scenarios in, because you only learn it through experience.
Yeah.
So I would say about a year and a half, 2, you should know how to do this.
Okay.
So, all right. So you heard it, everybody. When you go in and they want to do a handoff, any type of temperature available, a handoff, ask them if they have been there at least 2 years. You heard it here. Now, I have a question for Gabi too. Not sure if you have an opinion on this or not. We're not going to disclose any specific banks or anything like that, but Gabi did work at one of the bigger banks. not a small regional or anything like that. Do you have, because we've had different experiences on our end between smaller mom and pop banks and bigger banks. Do you know of any difference or see any difference about the kind of degree of training and or customer service that you might get depending on whether it's a smaller bank versus a big monolithic bank?
I know for bigger banks, there's more rules and policies that need to be followed, no ifs, ands, or buts. And as opposed to a smaller like credit union, they're a little bit more flexible.
Right.
But
Okay.
what's coming in is less than what's going into the bigger banks. So that's why there was a little bit more rules in place.
Yeah. And that's definitely what I would say we've seen on this side of it as well, is that it's just sometimes easier to get people, get answers, get help from smaller banks. And it's difficult, isn't it? Like all my banking is in one big bank. And it started because I had both a personal banker and a business banker. And then they've left. They've long since flown the coop. And I don't have any sort of contacts there. But it's also nice, they've got the app. You can do the remote deposits. You can pretty much find one no matter where you go. But then, you've got what Gabi was just saying, and certainly what we've experienced is you're kind of treated more like a number, and they have a lot more rules and guidelines they have to go by. The flip side of it is the smaller regional banks and so forth. They're more likely to get to know you. They're more likely to kind of walk you through things and be there for you. But then if you're traveling or you want, a lot of the assistance or even a lot of the, um, you know, the way things that you're able to do remotely, it's not as much there. So it's a hard decision. You got to figure out that balance for yourself. There's no right or wrong. I just know that that's been something that the first thing we always ask them is, where do you bank? And then see if we know a particular banker there. So let me get through a couple bad stories. Then I'm going to end on, I mean, look, it's not a happy story. We're a wills and probate firm. So all of them involve people dying. But if you can get over that hump, then this was a story that it was actually knowing a banker that made all the difference. But before that, let's keep trashing banks. So the I think the most egregious example of something that I have seen is I had a client, and this is back in the day when I would do house calls when I was more desperate for money, and it was before COVID. So I went to her house and she had an oxygen tank. I think that was like connected in her bedroom, but it had a cord where I don't know if it's called a cord. I'm not in medicine, but anyway, it had it where she could walk anywhere through the house. So just this whole like thing would just follow her. And so she was not doing well, my friends. She was not. So we're talking about doing her will and everything. And she had a mixture of kids that she was estranged from, that she wanted to cut out or just wasn't very close to. And she really had nobody. I mean, any friend or relative that she had passed away. And so she had these neighbors, these really nice neighbors, husband and wife, and she talked to them, and they finally agreed, yes, we will serve as your executor. It's fine, no problem. And so I told her, I said, okay, we'll go. And this is not advice. Everything is very specific to a circumstance. But in this circumstance, the easiest thing for us to do was for her to take this one account that she had at a bank and add her neighbors' names to it. Okay. That is something, don't ever do that without the advice of a qualified law firm. This is not a one size fits all. This was a scenario that we could figure out here so that they could have instant access to money. So great, that's the plan. They're going to go to the bank and do that. Now, mind you, let me, just in case this isn't clear, this is a woman who owned a bank account. It is her bank account. And she was going to add somebody to her own money to have access to it. I told you the situation with the oxygen tank. She also was on morphine here and there, not when I spoke to her. So I get a call a couple days later to find out that she was able to get herself to the bank with her portable oxygen tank with her neighbor, waited and waited and waited, only to then be told, you can't add this person to your account. You need to get your attorney to approve this. Now, I'm willing to give some benefit of the doubt that maybe there is something lost in the translation there, but I'm really perplexed how. I mean, it's her account. She says, there's this person with me. I want to add them to the account. I don't have any idea. What frustrates me is that the person they interacted with did not see the situation as maybe it was really difficult for her to get herself there. And maybe she doesn't have a lot more days left. Could you not have taken the lead here and tried to figure out a solution or find out a little bit more what they were trying to do? Or maybe say, hey, call your attorney while this is back in the day when I answered my phone, figure this out. And they didn't, and they sent her home. Now we were able to figure out a different solution around that, and that had nothing to do with involving the bank, but the solution to get some money that was right there when she passed away. But it was very, very frustrating. And the most frustrating thing about it is that story's not rare. I am amazed at some of the things that we hear from people when they go to the bank and that they've been told at the bank. One of the most common things that we hear is with that power of attorney. So I used the example earlier where it can be if you're disabled or incapacitated, but it also can be what's called effective immediately. And now instinctively, if you are going to give somebody a financial power of attorney, you instinctively would think, well, it's either effective immediately, and your other choice is to be effective upon disability or incapacity. Instinctively, probably you're going to think upon disability or incapacity. But Sam, what do we typically guide people
on? We usually recommend to do effective immediately, just so that way, if something happens, they can immediately act on it, and you don't have to wait for like a physician or doctor to declare you incapacitated.
Right. So again, this is very circumstantial. Do not make this choice without the guidance of a qualified estate planning and probate firm. But in general, we typically recommend that you make it effective immediately versus effective upon your disability or incapacity for a couple of reasons. One is effective upon, as Sam alluded to this, effective upon disability or incapacity. It's not what you're thinking. If you're just laid up in the hospital, and gosh, it sure would be easier for someone just to call the bank or handle this or, file the extension for my taxes because I've had this horrible accident or something like that. That won't count. The only effective immediately can get you that. The whole example of refinancing my mom's mortgage while she was in Hawaii is an example of effective immediately. It's a very stringent standard to have doctors certify in writing that you are disabled or incapacitated to be able to use it in that. So it's just not as usable. It's not as flexible. There are plenty of really good reasons to make it that way, but just as a generality, we do that. The other reason is I have found, back to the topic at hand, that financial institutions will hardly ever honor them unless they are effective immediately. And in fact, I have probably 5 examples that I can think of off the top of my head where somebody reached out that said, yeah, I took my power of attorney to the bank and for my mom, and they said, no, we can't honor this. It's not effective immediately. And I'm looking at it. It's like it literally says effective immediately. In fact, just to get a little into the weeds here, one of the reasons why we use the statutory durable power of attorney form as opposed to a more customized general power of attorney is because I want the power of attorney to look as much as possible like the power of attorney that the baby bankers are seeing in their manual. Like I don't want there to be anything subject to interpretation. But here's my favorite part. In the statutory durable power of attorney, it reads like this. Choose how you want it to be effective. Choose how you want it to be effective. Cross out the one you don't want. A, effective immediately. B, effective upon disability or capacity. Then it says, if nothing is selected, then it will be assumed you mean to have it effective immediately. I am pretty sure my 5-year-old would understand what I just explained, although she is very advanced, so that maybe that's not a fair comparison. I would bet your 5-year-old listener would understand what I just said. Okay? But we've gone every which way with this. I originally thought, well, gosh, it seems to be more intentional to cross out B, therefore leaving A effective immediately as the choice, because it says cross out the one you don't choose. And yet I've had bankers say that was ambiguous. So then there is a period or era of my practice where I decided, okay, well, then don't make any selection, because it says if nothing's crossed out, it's assumed it's effective immediately. That has become ambiguous. So now what we typically will do for those who want it effective immediately is we just say in big bold print, this is effective immediately. I don't know if we've had any run-ins with it being done that way. I get somewhat more insulated from issues these days with this fine team of people before me. But yeah, that's some of the problems that we've had. Did anybody want to interject? Looks like Cyntia, you've got a thought
Yeah.
on deck.
One of the things that I've ran across is we've had clients that took their financial power of attorney to their bank, and it was a bigger bank, and the bank said, no, you need to fill out ours and sign ours instead, and they wouldn't accept something that was drafted in accordance with the laws of Texas. So that is something that can happen, and what we tell clients in that case is like, just fill it out. If they're willing to notarize
Play the
it for
game.
you, just do it. Path of least resistance to get the job correctly done is typically just the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, I'd really, what I've recommended before, but keep in mind 70% of people don't even have a will or power of attorney or a trust. So take this with a grain of salt. But what I have recommended is to proactively contact your bank and say, I would like to make sure I have a power of attorney. I'd like to make sure that if I have an issue that you will honor this. And then if they can either have it on file, or if they have an internal document that they want you to fill out, then do that. But it is also where having a trust can be more advantageous. So once you're successful in getting them to put the account into the name of the trust, it's much easier to allow people a successor trustee, for example. So if it's not you and you've named somebody else to act for you, to be able to not have any issues, as it's much easier than using a power of attorney. But one of the things that I use a lot, I use this, I brought this up a few moments ago with a trust, but let me bring it up with a power of attorney, is when we talk about a lot of the downsides to trying to do things online or these DIY forms, is really this. It's not about filling out paperwork. It's not about what I sometimes refer to as Mad Lib lawyers, where it's just you fill in the blanks. That's not what you're paying for when you have a relationship with a firm that knows what they're doing. You notice I keep saying qualified and knows what they're doing, because there is a distinction there. And tune in for future episodes where we talk about the best way to find said qualified attorneys and law firms. But one of the things, now I distracted myself and I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know, is that if you have a power of attorney from online or a form, I'm going to tell you right now, a one done by our firm and one that you pull off the internet, you're just as likely to have it rejected. 100%. 100%. The difference is if you walk into a bank with the power of attorney for your brother and you got that power of attorney off the internet and they say, no, we can't honor this. This isn't correct. You're going to think, well, I did get it off the internet. Probably not. And it's not like I have really anybody to talk to. If you walk into that same bank with a power of attorney done by a qualified law firm, I'm going to tell you they're just as likely to say it's not valid. However, you instead are going to think, well, gosh, I went to a law firm. They really seem to know what they're doing. Besides, that one Google review, people really seem to think they know their stuff. But you know what? Let me just contact them. And I will tell you, there is very little I enjoy more than nasty grams, meaning writing nasty little letters to places. And I hate to tempt fate. I'm going to knock on wood, but I have a 100% success rate in explaining to, and it's not even, but you know what? I'm sorry, bankers. Sometimes it's attorneys, and I'm going to air quote this, legal departments of financial institutions. So let's give the bankers, even the baby bankers, a break for a second, because a lot of the time it's actual attorneys who presumably went to law school, passed the bar, and should know what they're doing, and they're saying no, and they reject it. But the difference is when you've got a firm, an advocate on your side, we can clear those things up. All right, are you ready for a good story? Well, besides the somebody dying part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cyntia, did you want to add something, or were you contemplating whether you want? No, I don't want to hear a good story. Give me more of the other stuff.
Kind of. I was just like, oh no. Are we going to talk about more of RLTs later and connecting assets to it via bank?
I mean, I'll let you talk about that. So
Okay, cool.
I just want to do
I
this
have some fun
story,
stories.
and you can do yours, and then I want Sara to tell us how she earned all those $1 bills.
Right on.
Oh yeah, she put it in here.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So this was in the first couple years of me starting my practice, and it's a story that has stuck with me this whole time. But it was a mom and a dad, and their 20-year-old had died suddenly, just devastated. And all she had was a bank account that had just over $5,000 in it. That's going to be significant here. And they went to the bank, and the bank was telling them, no, you need to go through this whole court process, you to present to us and do all of this and that. And they came to me, and I talked to them, and they said because it was over $5,000, they had no other way that they could do this. They had to go through this court process to do it. And I'll never forget the mom telling me, she said, Lorie, I don't want to go to court. I don't want to have to do these different steps and testify and this and that. She's like, every time I have to explain it, I'm reliving it. And so I found out the name of the bank, and it just so happened that someone in one of the networking groups that I was a part of worked at that bank. So I called her, well, for that bank, not at the same place. And I said, look, here's the situation. And she said, where do they live? She found out where they lived. And she called me back later, and she said, can they go to this particular branch, ask for this particular person this week during this time? I said, let me find out. The mom and dad called me on the way home from the bank, and they seamlessly got everything taken care of. They closed the account, gave it to them and everything. And they were just so appreciative to be able to have that closure and be able to move on. So as much as I will say about a lot of our frustrations, which Cyntia sounds like she's going to bring us right back there, but as much as I talk a lot about the frustrations, my biggest takeaway is really, if you can, like, try to find somebody that is a banker there, make it at your bank, make a relationship. When they leave or get fired, find somebody else, because knowing somebody, in my experience, that is the single biggest difference. And I don't know, Gabi, if you've seen kind of that play out, or if you have anything to offer on that.
No, I think it's true. Having a relationship with a banker is helpful in the long run, because there's been times where there's been customers that need help immediately, but because that established relationship is already there, it was easier to do things for them. So
Yeah,
I would agree with you.
first time ever. Not true. It's not true, everybody. All right, Sara, were you going to bum us back out with some trust stuff before we give Sara the floor?
You said Sara both times just then.
Yeah.
Oh my
no.
gosh.
Yeah, you're
You know
you're on
what?
a roll today.
I have whatever you had a couple weeks ago. Remember when you kept switching people's names and
Oh,
saying the wrong name? I have it now.
whenever I said Sarah could do legal production.
Was that before the eclipse?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay. Well, I caught
that
what
We're
you
was.
had.
different now.
Anyway, Cyntia, what do you have? We're
I have
running out.
I
We're
have
running
like
close
a
to
little
time
bit
here.
of all of it.
Okay.
We have a time limit? Okay, anyway.
Yes, today I do.
Oh, okay. So I have like two stories that are kind of similar. One took place back in 2020, the wonderful time of everything's closed. And if you want to go to the bank or get access to any of your stuff in your safety deposit box, you had to make an appointment. So we had a couple that came in. This was finally whenever we were able to get people in to sign their documents. And they were trying to get everything done as quickly as possible. So this was maybe a little after July of that year. And back then I was the one that was doing the signings. So I talked to them, I got them to get, all their stuff done in the office. Then they went out into the world and made an appointment with their bank. So this is a day whenever I believe I was working from home because I remember being in my office and I get this call and the wife is very frustrated. And she's saying how they made an appointment, they got all the way to the bank, and they're telling them that they can't change the name of the account. And if they open a new one, that they won't be able to take money out of it. And it's a matter of, okay, let me talk to the person. And just having, like, calling us to explain it to them, telling them, no, you're thinking of this kind of bank that does, yes, what you're saying, or this kind of account that does do what you're saying. This is different in X, Y, and Z manner. And typically they'll listen and then they'll try to do something. But back to the whole, if you're gonna need patience to be able to explain this because I got handed off. I remember that call to like 3 different people. Like she was just handing her phone to different people at the bank trying to get this sorted out.
Was it a warm handoff?
No, because all of a sudden a different voice would come on and it'd be like, "Hi, who are you?" "Okay, great. Hi, I'm blah blah from blah blah," and start my whole spiel over. So that's like one scenario that you can run into. But again, if you have a law firm, call them and they should be able to guide you through. And then I will give Baby Banker a shout out. There's this one time, there's a different client who they were going to, again, put their bank accounts in the name of their trust. So they're there, and when the husband's talking to me, he's like, "Look, this young man's trying to tell me something." I'm like, "Let me talk to him." He sounded very young, and he was doing everything he could to actually find someone that knew what the heck we were talking about. And in that case, like they try, you just have to explain and give them a chance to find a person. So just kind of like you just have to have a lot of patience whenever you're going through that. But see, they weren't so bummy.
Yes. Indeed. Yeah.
Like a lot of
indeed.
patience.
Yes. Great. All right. Well, thank you for that. And before we close, Sara, I understand that you've made a lot of $1 bills before and you wanted to share this story.
It was the only story I could come up with about banks. Yeah, I don't know. I used to deliver pizzas, and so I would deposit my biggest bills each week, but the ATM had a limit on how many bills you could deposit at once. So I would just keep all the ones. And it got to a point where, I mean, I had worked there for like 2 years. So I accumulated a lot of ones. I was like over $4,000, and I took the time to wrap each of them in stacks of 100, even with the blue strips. And then I took it all into the bank one day and deposited it and just stood there awkwardly as she fed it through the machine. It took, I don't even remember how long it took. It took a hot minute. I'm sure I was the worst part of her day.
You were.
So you want us to believe
I
that you had
promise you were.
$4,000 in ones from pizza delivery?
I could see
In the
1000%.
greater DFW area,
Listen,
yeah.
I delivered to suburban neighborhoods, and I was a young woman out of all of the men who delivered pizzas. Yeah.
Sara also just seems like the type to hoard. $1 bills. Like I can see.
Hold on. It's not necessarily the hoarding. It's avoiding the human interaction.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
She had to make it worth her while.
Yeah. It was just
Well,
like
I
easier to
think-
afford
Most
them.
things I've ever heard.
Well, I think we should tell the story since Gabby's here and it involves banks where Gabi made all my accounts shut down and get frozen.
What? I don't know that story.
Apologized.
So
She's still gonna bring it up.
Gabby's going to go get a doggy, like a cute little doggy, right? And she needed to have cash for it. And so she's like, is there any chance that anybody has like $600 in cash? And I'm like, that's ridiculous. And then I looked at my wallet and I'm like, well, this is a lawyer's life here. I don't know how. I guess I do. And so Gabi Zelled me the money and put in the note like for puppy or something. So like a day later, I am looking at my accounts and it says all of them are frozen. And so I call the bank. I was going to say it was fun.
Sarah can
I called the bank and they're like, let us look into this. They're like, are you running some sort of doggy puppy mill business?
Oh,
Who is this?
no.
Who is this Gabriella? Like, how do you know her? How long have you known her? What way do you know her? Are you doing business with her? Are you selling puppies with her? I mean, they didn't use all those words, but that's basically what it came down to. And I guess I was, I guess I gave them good enough story that they decided to reopen my accounts. But I don't know if that's a lesson about bankers or not to put any memo notes in when you Zelle people, because they're cracking down hard on running puppy businesses through Zelle. It's frowned upon, definitely frowned upon. Well, Gabi, thank you for joining us. There is nothing that I can think of that I enjoy more than having 4 people who are not doing their job at one time and are doing this instead.
This is my job. What are you talking about?
I mean, from a technical standpoint, this is only Sarah's job, but it's okay. It's fun to do this. You can join us anytime you want if you enjoyed it. If not, don't tell me or don't tell Sam. It'll hurt her feelings.
I did. This was fun.
I'll cry. Oh, yay.
Okay. Well, good. Well, then we'll
The
definitely
happiest
have
I've
to have
ever
you
seen
back.
Sarah, guys.
Yes. Awesome. Great. Well, then that concludes another wonderful episode of One of Us Knows What They're Talking About, and the other one is you. Join us next time where we'll tackle another topic where we deal with people who have absolutely no business doing what they're doing, or they have no business trying to do our business. Until next time, see you later.